am back today to talk about the grief and emotional aspects of losing a breast. I just had a mastectomy a month and a half ago, and beforehand I had quite a lot of time to prepare myself and listened to a really amazing podcast about 2 or 3 weeks before my surgery. I will link it below because I can't remember the name of the woman who did it, but she was a psychotherapist in Australia who specializes in cancer grief and who was a breast cancer survivor herself. And she had just an amazing series on just coping with the loss of a part of yourself that is your breast. And so I think that really prepared me well in a lot of ways. But what I'm realizing after I listened to that, I thought I would have a pretty severe period of grief at some point, and I'm sure I still will. But it's been a month and a half, and I haven't had anything severe yet. So just wanted to check in at the month and a half point and say that for me and probably other people of Northern European descent, maybe you won't, and maybe you'll have the kind of experience that I have had, where I've had a couple of incidents of emotional days or hours, and just wanted to talk about what those were like and how they're different than other times of grief that I've experienced in my life. So the main thing that is different about this time is I am the only one going through the loss. I haven't had medical grief before, so it's unique to me to be in a situation where no one else in my life can experience the depth of this emotion on the infrequent times that I've had it anyway, that I'm having. So it feels very alone. My husband has some loss for sure, and he's experiencing it internally, but he was raised in the Midwest, so he's not only Northern European, but recently Midwestern, where men are taught that it is absolutely unacceptable to have feelings. So my husband is experiencing a loss in some ways, but he deals with it in very different ways than I deal with it, and his preference is not to talk about it. And when we start to talk about it, it gets even more uncomfortable for both of us. So in that sense, it feels even more alone in some ways to be going through something like this. And I think that that's probably pretty typical, unless you have a very touchy-feely husband who is a psychotherapist, perhaps. Then you may feel as if you are grieving the same thing but very separately. And I think that's fine. There's no judgment or complaint, but I've found that I've had to find other ways to grieve healthily on my own. And I found a couple of other ways, so I wanted to talk about that too. So the first way, very fortunately, I have found a number of friends have recommended recently, regardless of my situation, have recommended the television series from the BBC called Call the Midwife. And this is a television series that is all about life transitions, marriage and birthing, especially birthing, and death and sickness, lots of sickness, and coming from the perspective of the nurses who are observing and grieving along with everyone that they are serving. And it's just been a really good, nourishing, healthy way for me to sit alone in a room, and I need to do something while I'm recovering. So it's not depressing to me. I don't know if it would be to others. I am someone who tends to be very in touch with my emotions, so I think I would know if I was getting depressed like I normally do with a lot of either vulgar or violent or inappropriately humorous television. So I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful that there are, I think, 11 seasons and something like 60 or 70 episodes. So it is unending therapy for me. Not that it is a substitute for therapy, it isn't, but it is really, really very comforting to be kind of experiencing the losses and the joys and the ups and downs of life in this television show, which is super tasteful and appropriate. But I want to say too that there has been something even better than watching this television series as a just a bystander and observer, which has been to listen to the stories of other women who have been through various and very, very different breast cancer experiences. Every breast cancer journey is different and unique, and yet there are some elements of it that are shared by all of us, and the loss aspect is certainly one of them. And so I've been really grateful for both Instagram and YouTube and podcasts especially, and their ability to just bring me a bunch of different random, plain old, non-exciting, maybe non-eloquent, non-unique or special women and their stories. Like just a bunch of just regular old women and their cancer stories, and shocked every single time to see how impactful it is to feel for the first time not alone in my grief, and to feel that understanding that is there in different ways. Every single time is something different, some aspect that I hadn't thought of, or that I didn't realize I already felt or had already struggled with and might still struggle with. So I really, really, if anything at all, I recommend listening to the stories of other women. And it doesn't have to be anyone like super wise or experienced or medical in their background. And so that's the reason why I've started to both make these videos for YouTube, but also I'm trying to share on a daily basis for about 90 seconds on Instagram, because I have been so blessed to hear the stories of others. And then in starting to share my own story, I've been so blessed to hear my own words come out of my mouth and to process my own grief and misunderstandings and frustrations and struggles in this audible way that is just so very healing and therapeutic. It's why we go to therapists, because we get to hear ourselves talk about our own struggle out loud, and there's something about that is just amazing for the soul. So I do feel that I'm doing really well. There have been, like I said, just a couple of incidents. One was the death of a dear client of mine who I normally see every week, but I've been away from work. And in the first couple weeks that I missed my shifts, the client that I see the most often and who I help the most often had passed away. And that incident was a stimulus for my erupting and a fountaining of tears. And I don't think that all of the tears were due to my love for my client. It was definitely just a trigger that allowed me to feel the grief I was already feeling. But maybe I wasn't feeling safe acknowledging that I was feeling, or maybe I was just in survival mode. Maybe after surgery we stay in survival mode for a number of weeks or months. The other incident was right after my post-op from this last surgery. I was feeling very, very misaligned with my surgeon, and I made the choice to express some of my frustrations to my husband, who was not receptive, and I got really emotional really quickly, and again felt very alone and misunderstood. And so for me, medical environments trigger a lot of kind of trauma and frustration and powerlessness, a lot of powerlessness, which comes from other stuff even further back. But So I definitely notice that I get more emotional on days that I've seen a medical professional who has some kind of authority over me. That's definitely a trigger for me. That may not be a trigger for you, and thank God if it isn't, because it's not pleasant. But those are the two incidents of my kind of suddenly experiencing a lot of emotion very quickly. It's just a time when we just have to be very thin-skinned, of course. And I hope that I can be gracious to myself as I would be to others in that setting when it does happen again, and I'm sure it will. I'm sure that, a couple months from now I'll have even more insight and some more suggestions for you about grieving or dealing with the emotional aspects of mastectomy or lumpectomy, or just losing a part of your body that is so much a part of your identity and daily experience. But for now, that's what I've got. And I think it's plenty for me. It's done me well, and I've been so grateful to have found both of those resources that I mentioned. So that's all I have for today. Just wanted to talk a little bit about emotions and grief and this weird process. Thanks for listening, and please be kind in your comments, as I know most of you will be. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.